Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey Adam, how are you today?
Good, yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. Hey, and whereabouts you located?
Yerevan, Armenia.
Never been there. Give me a fun fact about Armenia.
It has its own alphabet.
Like what? What does it look like? Give me an example.
Everybody says it looks like Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Like Elvish, kind of.
Yes.
Oh, wow. This is a totally off topic, but what language group is the Armenian language in?
Indo-European, so sort of most closely related to Greek. But that's not off topic. Okay. We're talking about languages.
True. And I'm just curious, so if it's related to Greek, are there any words in English that we could use in Armenian?
Sure, like center would be kentron.
Ah, okay. So it's almost like I don't know if it's that's a Latin thing, but it's
yeah, that one's from the Romans.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Let's just take a step back and imagine that I walk up to you at an industry event. It could be gala or something like that, and you've got a booth there. And I say, "Oh, ModelFront. What do you guys do?"
So my first question would be, do you know what post editing is?
Yeah, it's like you translate something using machine translation, and then you have somebody to kind of check it and make sure that it's okay and modify it if it's not.
Exactly, right? And my next question would be, what percentage of those segments that you're sending off for post editing are coming back unedited?
That's a good question. I've never thought about it that way. Why is that important?
So if that number is very high, we see that number varying from about 50% on average to as high as 90%. Then
I'm paying for those people to check stuff, but not do anything on it. Check stuff that doesn't need to be checked, is what you're telling me.
Right. To be fair, they are doing work. It does take them a lot of cognitive effort to go through all of those segments, but there isn't any benefit to those segments specifically being looked at, right? It's more of a ritual blessing. So if you could detect those segments beforehand and could sort of treat them like 100% translation memory matches, then you can, save a lot of time and money, but get equivalent quality like with 100% translation memory matches.
How much time and money could I save?
So, yeah, if 90% of the segments are being left unedited, then probably roughly 80% of the time and money could be saved.
The post-editing cost. Wow.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Yes.
It's funny because when I came into the industry, machine translation was just starting to gain some traction, and nobody thought about breaking down. They would look at post-editing cost in terms of what was the efficiency gain if we human translate or we machine translate with a post-editor, and you'd look at the efficiency gains. And back then it was, a lot of times it was negligible that, whether there was a benefit or not. And then, depending on the domain, if you're doing like manuals or things like that, where you've got kind of a very well-defined style, vocabulary, etc., or terminology, the gains would be better. But people weren't breaking down the post-editing cost in terms of, they would look at the cost itself, but not in terms of like, do we need to spend this much on it or not? So what you're saying is you're spending this much on post-editing, but you might not need to. So how does ModelFront help out with that?
Right. So yeah, back then, 10 years ago, almost every single MT segment needed to be edited.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not the case. As I said, like 50% to 90% are being left unedited. And so basically ModelFront is giving a score for every single segment that you can use to control which segments go to post editing.
And how do you do that?
Using AI, of course, right? So,
Damn,
I guess
AI is everywhere, man.
right. Probably everybody in this room knows that this ChatGPT technology, at its core, there's something called the transformer. And the transformer actually came out of neural machine translation and now is essentially, caused the same revolution that we already saw in translation, causing it in a bunch of other fields like writing monolingual marketing content. But in translation, right, we were already using transformer-based models. We're already using what's called large language models, massively multilingual large language models. So it's basically based on this sort of technology. And importantly, on millions of human edit decisions on that customer's exact data.
Drill down on that. I mean, how does it actually work?
So if you want to think about this like maybe self-driving car, right? So self-driving cars, if you go back even before self-driving cars, we already had self-driving trains. We already had self-landing planes. So these were sort of very constrained domains with a relatively high throughput where automation was worth it. And the next level of automation out would be like driving on a highway. For those folks who know Silicon Valley, 280. So it's kind of straight, not that many traffic jams, right? And pretty high value.
Silicon Valley, no traffic jams?
They're all on the 101, right? So, but the 280 is sort of the back one. Yeah. And so it's the easier one to automate in a sense, right? And so translation is a lot like that, right? You have folks who are translating, let's say 100 million words a year, and within the same domain, right? Same technical manuals, right? And there are, of course, translation memory matches, typically very high match rates in these scenarios, up to 80%, 90% even. Right. And then you have the new segments, but those new segments, they're not totally random. They're not like somebody's tweet. They're still from within this very narrow domain, right? And like they say, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right? So
I love that.
These segments are not an exact repeat, or they'd be a TM match, but they definitely rhyme with what's occurred before in that content flow. And so at some point, after a human has looked at this thing 10 times and signed off on it, or 100 times or 1,000 times, at some point you become able to say mathematically that there is a very high probability that this thing doesn't require editing, whereas this other thing we cannot sign off on.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Are you ever wrong?
Oh, yeah.
So me as the customer, how do I protect myself? Because really what I care about is the accuracy and then the quality. Quality is more ambiguous than accuracy, but what I really care about is the accuracy of what's being translated, right? And if somebody's not post-editing it, how do I, and you just said sometimes you're wrong, so how do I get around that?
Right. So again, I'll make the self-driving analogy, right? So do self-driving cars cause accidents?
Do they cause accidents?
Or do they get in accidents?
Now we're getting into did they definitely get into accidents? I mean, think about it. Sometimes through no fault of their own, self-driving cars going down here. A little kid runs in front of the car. The car has the option to swerve out of the way and hit another car on the side of the road. And how does the car react in that situation? That's an ethical dilemma that I don't think we should be delegating to cars, but
Right.
which is software actually, right? But okay, so sorry, we kind of go down that rabbit hole, but go ahead.
Well, I invited that. Yeah. Well, yeah. Luckily, we're not talking about those types of scenarios here, but
Right, we're talking about translation.
point,
Translation, all right.
there is important translation, right? There are life and death translations, but we're mostly not talking about that. So, but the point is, there it will never be perfect. There will always be accidents, right? And what we're talking about here, in a sense, is basically that little thing, that very important thing inside of the self-driving car, which says stop and let a human take over. That's what we do for translation. Stop and let a human take over. And the point here, though, is that when we look at a self-driving car, if we establish a sort of a reasonable guideline for when they can go out, the goal is not perfection. The bar is not perfection. The bar is, when do they cause less accidents than humans?
Apparently, according to Elon Musk, it's not that. It's when do they cause 10 times less accidents than humans is when we'll have.
Right. So they're held to a higher standard, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I get what you're saying.
Well, in translation, basically the bar for the customers is, okay, does it only cause roughly the same amount of translation accidents, right?
Right. But the costs are 10 times less. So, hey, that's the critical benefit there. And even if you're just 100% human, there's no guarantee that you're not going to get mistakes. In fact, I guarantee you'll get mistakes. I mean, that's just it. I mean, the whole human factor thing, right? I mean, so that's
definitely
interesting.
All the data has mistakes, and you can also use quality prediction to find human mistakes. And we routinely find human mistakes as part of onboarding and these evaluation processes.
So what's the typical scenario where you engage with a new customer, and how does that engagement start? Do you look at their old TMs? Do you do some kind of alignment, or how does it work?
Mm-hmm. The first question would always be what I asked you before is, okay, are you doing post editing? How many words a year?
Lots.
Right. Lots.
A bajillion. Okay.
Right. The next question would be, what percentage of those segments are being left unedited?
I have no idea.
Nobody has any idea. It's very interesting.
Right?
Nobody knows the answer to that question because it was never important in the past.
You just made me feel like I'm at the trade show, come up to your booth, and then you ask me that question. All of a sudden, I feel like an idiot because I'm like, damn, man, I should know that, but I don't know. But okay, and then? No,
nobody knows it, right? Because this metric was never important. There were a few people who said, I think it's pretty high, but nobody knew the number. And so, and in fact, most people don't know how to even get that number. And that's one of the things where we then work with the customer, but also with memoQ together to first, let's just see, because if you're
work with
saving,
who? Work with who?
Well, with memoQ.
Okay, I just wanted you to say memoQ twice. It's called product placement.
Right. So that we involve them in this and say, okay, if let's say only 5% or 10% of the segments are being left unedited, sorry, there's really no possible savings here.
Right.
So here's 3 tips to go improve your machine translation.
Yeah, but like, what's the process for measuring that? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Very simple, right? It's literally like what percentage of if you look at the original, the machine translation, and the final human translation, what percentage of the segments, for what percentage of them is the final translation exactly equal to the machine translation?
And where do you get that information? Because everybody should be doing that right now. Like that should be step one right now. Whether that they call you, I would think that everybody should immediately have that information. Where do they get that information?
It's very hard. You got to get it out of your TMS, but it's very hard to piece things together. It's like a forensics project, frankly.
Okay. And do you help with that?
We do that upfront for free because we're not interested and they're not interested unless we know that that number is very high.
And how long does that take?
Few days.
Okay. Interesting.
I have one with one of your competitors. Sorry, that's been dragging on a month and a half right now. So just
I don't work with our competitors. Yeah. They're really slow. They're just, cumbersome.
Right.
Probably not even using AI. They don't even know what that means, man. It's a joke. Hey, so then what happens if the delta is quite large? Like, hey, wow, we're paying for this post editing, but like 90% of this stuff is not actually being edited. Then what happens?
At that point, we should basically look at the business case together and say, hey, you're doing this many words a year, this many hundreds of millions of words a year, tens of millions of words a year. And you're paying this much percent a word, this many cents a word. And this percentage could realistically be saved. Would you like to go forward or not? Right. And at that point, that's the time to optionally do a case study and say, hey, let's train a custom model based on your data, cleaning out the bad stuff in your data, of course, all the things that go along with that. Do a proper human evaluation, do this wine test that we talked about, where we say, okay, final output of the new process, final output of the old process, give it to human linguists, your own linguists, and let them check it. Just promise me one thing. Don't tell them which wine was 10x cheaper.
It's got to be a double-blind, placebo-controlled test, right?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Scientific.
I learned that on Joe Rogan. So let's say that comes back positive, and then we say, you know what? Even we factor in ModelFront's costs, we want to proceed. What's the process, and how do you charge?
Okay. Well, the process used to be quite a pain, actually, because then you'd have to do your TMS integration. But at this point, ModelFront has built connectors for quite a few TMSs, and I shouldn't say quite a few, but some TMSs have built a
like which one?
To ModelFront.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Translate 5, Crowd-In, memoQ.
Okay, built, that's the one I was. That's the one I was waiting for. But go ahead.
I'm trying to be fair here, and I went in chronological order. Have built a connector to ModelFront. So you basically don't have to do very much at that point. In all of this process, you really don't have to do very much. You basically have to approve and say yes, please continue to the next step. And so it's just about going into memoQ one time and setting it up and saying, hey, everything above 90%, I'd like to be approved.
And how do you make money?
So we basically price it by the volume. So there is some one-time setup cost, but then we look and say, okay, you're going to have this much savings, and we'll basically discount to make sure that you have a positive ROI. And then it's based on the volume. So, all right, if you're saving this much on 10 million words, it'll be this much. If you do another 10 million words, then again, we'll have a cut of that. So you'll always come out ahead.
Awesome. Let's back up a little bit and tell me a little bit about the company, where you're at in your life cycle, where you were established. And I know you're in Armenia. You also go to Zurich. I don't know why, because that just sounds like a super expensive place to do business. But but hey, they've got good. Where you're not even wearing a suit. They've got good clothes there and stuff like that. And then you're in Palo Alto. So explain a little bit about the company.
Right. So. Well, my background is software engineering. I was at Google, moved to Silicon Valley when I was 22 and and my dream was to work at Google Translate, and I eventually did that. So I'm sort of a graduate of Google Translate and Google Research. And before that, go ahead.
A lot of people just say my dream is to work for Google, but you were very specific. Google Translate. Why?
I speak 8 languages. At that point, I probably only spoke 5 or 7, but so it's very natural, right? You're like, okay, languages, and I just, I'm studying computer science. So what do I do? And there was no ChatGPT back then, right? So the options of where to work were a lot less. And this was something, how it is. It's like it's a tool that's useful that, all of us use. And it's really exciting to be able to join something like that, especially at that time, join it where the people who had created it were still working on it.
What was the most mind-blowing thing that you can talk about that you saw when you were at Google Translate?
I think the most mind-blowing thing in a lot of ways would be people just imagine that these products get built by lots of people. And and we get asked a lot, how many people are you, right? And it should really be about the results, in my opinion. So what would your guess be the size of Google Translate, on average over the last 10, 15 years?
I don't know. Have you ever seen the speech from Steve Ballmer when he was CEO of Microsoft? And they were talking about, I forget which market he was going to go into. And he's like, doesn't matter if we're behind. We have billions of dollars and we're just going to throw money into it. And I could just imagine, like, that's my vision of Google, or my, perception of them, that whatever problem they're trying to solve, they can just throw money in it, which means they can hire more people. So to your question, I don't know, 500 people.
15 to 20.
Wow. But if each one of you could speak 8 languages.
No, that was not a requirement. That's just my passion. I was the guy there who spoke the most languages. And right. So, I mean, at this point,
that's pretty crazy, man. That's crazy.
And not even that, let's say, I mean, most of those people were researchers. So in engineering, we were basically 3 engineers doing the app, the mobile website, the Chrome extension, the Chrome feature, the API, right? And so you just look at some of the overhiring.
Why don't you leave and create your own spin-off, man? Immediately just call, like, instead of Google Translate, you just call it GT or something, man. Dude, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I'd really like to. I do have an answer for that question. I'd really like to answer, but I probably need to let a few more years go by to do that on the record.
It's called an NDA and employer agreement and all that kind of stuff. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, let's move on. Okay, so let's go back to your company.
Right. So that was my background, and my co-founder, he had been at 2 ad tech startups. So Google's also an ad tech company in the end, right? So he had been at 2 ad tech startups.
I'm sure they've got more than 15 to 20 people on ad tech. I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and he had been an engineer and then engineering manager and doing product at these 2 ad tech startups. He joined, as an engineer when they were a few dozen people, and ultimately both those companies exited for more than $100 million. One was based in Silicon Valley and one was based in Berlin. And so that's how he got into startups. And his wife was and is a translator. So, for example, at Booking. So he knew also about the problem that we're talking about.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't, man,
especially engineers.
It's amazing, actually. To me, it's just, I don't know, because I've been in the industry, but maybe also because I lived overseas off and on for like 20 something years. Like, I just get it, right? But a lot of people are like, what did your company do? We're like, well, we take English and we put it into like Spanish. And they're like, well, why do you do that? and then,
right.
the classic one is you call an interpreter a translator or a translator an interpreter. They're like, and I'm not,
I do that.
Dissing on anybody. It's just, if it's not in your if it's not relevant to you, you don't see it, but I think in the industry, I think it's easy to make the assumption that people get it, but a lot of people don't. So it was your co-founder, his wife was a translator, so he got it. Go ahead.
Right. And he's an international guy too, right? Having worked in these different countries, been on business trips to China and so on. Right. And I think that's something too that, we often missed, in Silicon Valley, was this daily need for translation. So, and I think that's one of the things where, let's say DeepL, for example, who was also a bunch of ex-Googlers, but they were based in Germany. They had more of a feel for the way that the multilingual world works in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, Germany will just be part of the EU, and then being a very strong exporter and importer, there's just massive amounts of translation that's required there. And it's just, I mean, come on, you get in your car, you're in Europe, you get in your car and you can cross 3 different borders in a morning, I mean, it's just kind of crazy.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I had always dreamed about doing this. I had started a little bit in this direction when I was at Google Translate. There's stuff like this "Did you mean" button, right? Because back then, one of the biggest causes of bad translations was the bad input. The old systems did not deal with it very well. Transliteration, so accepting like Russian or Arabic, that's written in the Latin alphabet, right? Which it often is online. So those kind of things. So I'd really started in this direction, and I, wanted to solve this problem. And there were folks researching it, like Lucia Spezia. There are folks inside on Babel and so on. And then this neural revolution happened. So I quit Google, and I'm thinking, surely, this is going to become, somebody's going to offer this product, or Google will offer this feature or whatever, right? And neural revolution happens and say, now they're really going to do it. It became slightly easier to build. And then certain things came out. These large language models we're talking about, the first ones. And I said, okay, but they're not multilingual. Then the multilingual large language model's out, and I just couldn't stop myself. I said, I'm going to do it, or nobody is. And we launched a company. We registered in late 2019. By January 2020, we had launched an API that supported 100 languages and 10,000 language pairs. So like full customization for something like German to French. Did those first case studies, there were failed ones too, but successful case studies with enterprises and LSPs, and basically homed in on the exact way to create value with something that says if a translation is good or bad.
That's awesome, man. And how did you get your initial seed funding?
So we actually had sort of rejected offers of funding, of free seed funding, and so on. And we said no. I mean, we're both have some reserves and so on, given our track record, and we just wanted to focus on working with our first early customers. And after we had done that and basically proven that this thing can work, we went ahead and raised seed funding. And we're sort of very boring. In that sense, we don't innovate there. It's just this typical Silicon Valley setup, right? Delaware C Corp, raise the seed round and so on. So
you do have a team in Armenia and an office in Zurich, so that's kind of not that boring.
That's
pretty cool.
super common these days. Go look at the statistics for Y Combinator. That's almost the norm.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah.
So where are you at in the business cycle? Have you gone out for another round?
No.
Wow. So you're to this point, you're self-funded?
No, I mean, we took the first round, right? We raised the first round.
I got you. Yeah. I thought you said that you were just self-funded and then you did go out and get initial. Okay.
We got a seed round, yep.
Okay. Awesome. Because and the reason I ask this is a lot of times when companies are selecting vendors, they want to make sure they want to feel comfortable with the financial viability of the company that they're doing business with, and they want to make sure that they're not going to get. We've seen some industry news in the last week. DotSub, for example, they just went away,
correct.
Right? And that's kind of scary, man. I mean, imagine that you've picked this company to do all this work for you. You've sold your boss on the idea that, hey, this company is going to do everything. And you do set up all the workflows and everything like that. And now that company's out of business. And now you're back to square one and trying to figure out who's going to do it. So, So in terms of that, how do you address it?
We really don't get that very much, frankly. And, but obviously, we've been sort of living within our means, if you know what I mean, right? So that's what I mean by sort of, we don't take every funding offer we get, right? So rather we try to focus on creating value and running a tight ship.
Cool. How do you stay ahead of the technology curve, and what do you see coming down the road? I mean, of course, everybody's speculating on AI and the LLMs, and you said, what was it, the LLMs? So what's coming down the road over the next 6 months? And then let's look out like 2 years. What are going to be the major disruptors or changes?
Mm-hmm. So the way I see it is you start a company because you believe fundamentally that there's a gap between what is possible to build and what people can get their hands on, right? You're saying, hey, it's possible with the right 2 guys or the right 10 guys, it's possible to build something that doesn't exist today, right? People would want it, but they can't get it, right? And so our mission was to say, hey, this thing that can be built with the right people, we're going to make it so you can get it in your hands, and now you can even just get it with a button click in memoQ, right? And so that when there's like more AI advances, then it's sort of like, again, it kind of resets that. And like, okay, now slightly cooler things are possible to build. Again, what people can get their hands on didn't magically move forward with that. Again, there's a gap, and it's our job to then bring that to people. So that's just a sort of never ending thing. And I would even say that despite our efforts to bring, what was possible when we started to people, to close that gap, the gap almost keeps increasing because the barriers to folks using AI tend to be things like they're not saving their data, that they would need to train it. They're not even using MT yet. They have organizations which have blockers in them. Let's call them non-technological issues.
GDPR. You can't do it, man, because of GDPR. And you're like, dude, the GDPR has no. And they're like, no, dude, yeah. And I'm like, no, man, come on, man. It's just non-technical blocker, dude.
I mean, if you look at some of the largest buyers, which are international organizations, they have armies of translators who just refuse to post edit, and because of the organizational structure, they cannot be coerced to do so. Yeah. So it's just like a mutiny,
I'm
right?
Artist, man. I'm an artist. I'm not a translator. I'm an artist, man. You can't replace me and make me do post editing.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Which I understand.
I totally respect translators. But at the same time, we used to have these things, people in America called typesetters. and they would actually go in and physically take the, I forget what they're called now, the printing blocks and set the type and all that stuff. And then, then something called like DTP public software came online, and that whole industry is just gone. And I'm not saying that's going to happen with translators, but I think you have to be aware of the trends and adapt to the tools. That's my little editorial aside there.
Well, when you look at these workflows that we're talking about, the best candidates for our technology, where 90% of these segments are approved, is that fun or enjoyable or fulfilling as a translator, where your life is all day, you look at machine translated output, and 9 out of 10 of them you don't edit, right?
Well, and here's the problem with that too. I mean, as a human being, that has done a lot of editing. What the material you edit will affect the way that you start to write and perceive things. So you're training the machine's training you. Like, I don't know if you use like Grammarly or any of these other tools. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it'll make recommendations, and technically it's right, but that's not the style I would use. But I'm like, well, okay, I'll just do that. And all of a sudden that becomes my style, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So
there's some of that too, right? So I think like the future is this, just like with translation memory matches, like people argued against translation memory back in the day, in the 80s and 90s. And translation memory is basically saying, hey, if this thing has already been translated once, we're not going to spend humans' valuable lives having it translated again. And
the house is black. We don't need to, it's like it's done.
Right. And so it's, I would argue, incredibly likewise unfulfilling to repeatedly translate the same thing, right? That doesn't sound like fun. And so this is really the same. And so if we say, okay, so that's the world we don't want. The world we do want, and the way the world is going, is that we target our human cognition towards the things that are interesting, that do need our eye, right? And thereby become radically more efficient. And the good thing about this is, of course, that as like with the translation memory, as human quality translation becomes more efficient, volume increases. People order more. If I can go into this market for 1 million instead of 10 million, I'm going to add that language, right? And so volume just increases. So that's good for humanity. And I really hate to predict the future, actually. So I'm not predicting the future at all here. Actually, what I'm just describing is what some people are already doing and have been doing for 5 years, right?
Right.
So it's just that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And memoQ, for example, it did something now to sort of make that future more evenly distributed by integrating this, as a default thing into the system.
Awesome. Hey, but you did mention that, you're always looking at that ever widening gap between what is possible and what's happening. And my question to you would be, where do you look to understand what the capabilities are out there? I'm talking about, like, are there associations? Are there people that you follow? Are there newsletters? Or is it just a combination of everything? Because, I mean, your role is quite interesting. As CEO, you got to be worried about, like, hey, what is our marketing thing? And hey, you developers, you do some developing stuff. And, oh, what about funding? And, oh, by the way, I got to be looking at the future, right? So how do you do that?
That's a pretty good description, actually. No, as far as the machine learning stuff, that's my world, right? I came out of that world and I didn't know what is a TMS or what is an LSP when I was at Google.
Wow.
And when I started ModelFront. So I had
crazy.
to learn all of that, right?
We all knew about you. We knew about Google Translate, but you didn't know about us. That's funny. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's asymmetric, right? And so that is my world. One of the co-authors of the transformer, right? This architecture used in neural machine translation and in ChatGPT is a good friend of mine. for more than a decade, and that's sort of the my social life and so on. And now we have in our company, people much more into that than I am, even, who are constantly monitoring all of that. So really, the challenge here was in the other direction, to sort of break out of all that and go and sit with people and look at their workflows and their data formats and the pricing models and all of this, because it's not obvious from the outside. It's also complex and it evolved over decades, right? And go understand where is the value here and where is the waste here.
What I like about your answer is I was making the assumption that you got to be looking forward at the evolution of AI and LLMs and MMLLMs. But what you're saying is you got to be aware of that, but you really got to get into the weeds of what your customers are doing. At Google Translate, you weren't sure, you didn't know what an LSP was, or I forget what else you said, or a TMS, for example.
TMS.
Yeah. And if that team had been aware of this, you guys might have, the platform may have changed. The commercialization of that platform may have changed. So it always goes back to know your customer, not just the technology. I think that's
right.
what I'm hearing you saying.
True. I would say, so they probably wouldn't change. So their user, not their customer, their user is somebody using one of these, or probably a cheaper phone than this one, right? Yeah. And 99.9% of the traffic comes from that. 99.
Yeah, but they did have an API that a paid API service that LSPs could use, right? And I'm just saying, if they had a deeper understanding, they may have, even if they didn't, I'm just saying it's important to know the customer. But
it is important to know the customer, but basically that's not their customer. And if you see what I'm saying, right? It's a very small percentage of the traffic. And they would have to start charging the language industry a lot more in order to make it something to worry about. So, but then in terms of us knowing our customer, my interest is really like, okay, let's look at your workflows today. Like you even see people they're looking at like what's happening on the news, and it leads to analysis paralysis, where they're like, oh, let's not do anything because AI is gonna improve even more tomorrow. And like that becomes again an excuse to keep doing things fully manually today, right? And I'm much more interested in like, okay, like this technology exists, this workflow exists that you spent a few $1 million on last year, and you're going to spend another few $1 million on next year. Let's talk concretely about what can we do about that. Right. Mm-hmm. So not this crazy speculative stuff. Is AI Terminator going to eat our babies? But rather just like, let's, in the meanwhile, right? In the meanwhile, let us save time and money and increase the amount of content that we can translate in this enterprise translation workflow.
So let's just talk concretely about what ModelFront's going to be doing over the next 6-12 months. Do you have any big plans, announcements you'd like to make?
I'd say the most interesting things, frankly, we only share with the customers, so the roadmap, right? But definitely what we can publicly say is that we will keep adding TMS integrations and keep improving the TMS integrations that exist to make it possible to get this stuff into more people's hands. The other thing to make it possible to get into more people's hands is to lower the amount of data that's required.
Oh, that's a good point.
So very, very boring, or not, let's say not exciting in the sense that we're already doing both of those things, and we're going to continue to do both of those things. And that this is something we're always going to do, both of them.
I'm like fascinated with the whole idea of just random sampling to achieve efficient gains of insights. So, like polls, they do random sampling. Like the whole sentiment analysis, you have these hugely complex algorithms that go out and monitor all the traffic in a specific channel. Like, why don't you just do a random sampling? Like, you could actually even use humans. If the algorithm was right, you would have a more accurate understanding of the sample. But if you did it right, just by having, like, say 10 samples, you'd understand. But you gotta, you know what I mean? So what you're saying is, figure out a way to touch less data, but get just the same or even better understanding of what needs to be post-edited or not, right?
Right, because people have lots of terms, right? Lots of terminology, typically hundreds, and you want to see, and the data are not clean, right? So you want to see lots of examples of each term, and the terms can be used in different contexts. They may have different translations in different contexts. My favorite word right now is feature. Feature has like 10 translations into Spanish, into German, right? So you really need to see lots of examples per word, to make a sufficient
Get that context.
judgment about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Well, Adam, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think I love it when I talk to somebody where I learn something new or I get a different perspective. And I've done that today, so I really enjoyed that. And I'm sure that there are a lot of companies out there that would find ModelFront's platform very valuable. So thank you so much for being on memoQ Talks, and I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Likewise, always a pleasure, Mark.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.